Hari Om to all of our friends in Uttarkashi, devotees and disciples of Sri Swami Chidanandaji, our beloved Guru. This is Don and Moo here to say a few words.
What comes to mind is the fact that how valuable it is to have Swamiji as a companion, sort of with you all the time. And that's immensely helpful in just dealing with the day-to-day situations. When you have someone of so sublime a person as Swamiji with you, your interaction with others takes a different tone. As if Swamiji was there with you, you tend to be at your best. That's a part of post Swamiji's presence here on earth that carries on and continues to be of immense value through life. How wonderful it was to have such a person as Swamiji
With us. So,
I want to tell you one little story. It may seem insignificant, but it really impressed us at the time. Swamiji was visiting us in Dallastown, Pennsylvania, where we lived for 5 years. And he came to our house there, and that was where I got initiation. And it was the dead of winter, cold, freezing, ice everywhere, snow on the ground. And Swamiji wanted to go for a walk. So we jump in the car and we drive out the most lonely part of the county I could find, and started walking down this road. Ice and snow everywhere, and I looked down and Swamiji had a pair of sandals on and no socks, and very lightly dressed, and we were bundled up. It was cold for us. He seemed to be unaffected by it, and as people would pass us in their cars, here's two Westerners and this monk walking along in orange robes in the middle of the country. They'd drive by and their heads would just turn and follow this scene. I'm sure they thought this was like not even understandable. That was a really interesting walk.
so we're just giving a few examples. There's so many examples we could talk about, but one time, and Swamiji always taught by example. So one time in our house where we live now in Sunbeam, Swami Ramswarupananda has been here, and so has Swami Yati Dharmananda been here. So upstairs in where Swamiji was staying in the bedroom, there were two beds, and in between the beds was a little cabinet with a drawer in it, which we used to throw odds and ends in this drawer because it was just handy, like rubber bands, paper clips, pens, pencils, little notebooks, even some jewelry or something like that. And Swamiji stayed for about a week or so, and then after he had gone, maybe a few weeks after he had gone, I happened to just open the drawer, and Swamiji had tidied the whole drawer. It was a small drawer, but he had put everything in order, lined up the pens and straightened the whole thing up, and it was a shock to me because, first of all, it was like a reflection on how untidy I was, and then Swamiji's attention to detail was the way that he was teaching, you know, pay attention to everything you do, have everything as orderly as you can. So that was a teaching that I remember.
In the same way, observing Swamiji was a full-time activity, because that's where you really learned what it was all about, is watching him. And in that regard, I began to observe how patient he was in when he considered things, and I suppose he was considering all the possibilities or something, because he would often allow things to mature at their own speed rather than trying to push it. And I've tried to practice that in my own life, having observed it in his life. There are things that I would like to see happen, but something says the cosmos has another timeline on this idea, and you must wait and let things fall into place in a natural way. This was Swamiji's excellence, was his ability to do things at the proper time rather than push things ahead. Learning patience was a great lesson he taught.
Another time when Swamiji came, I think it was in the 1980s, and there were quite a few of us gathered at Swami Gurudevananda's house in Urbana, where she and Samarpana used to live. Swamiji decided, all right, we're all going to go out and walk for a walk in the morning, and we all followed him out. He threw his robe over his shoulder, and we all walked out up into this cornfield that was on the other side of the house. There was no corn in it because it was winter time. So we all had coats, shawls, woolen hats, and all that, and Swamiji wasn't even aware of how cold it was, and began to sing. And we all had kirtan up there, and it was very a divine meeting. But we were cold. Everybody was wrapped up and, you know, shivering, except for Swamiji, who didn't. It was completely beyond body consciousness and not even feeling the cold. Then it became lunchtime, and Samarpana came to call us from the house, and Swamiji said, couldn't we have a picnic? And Guru Devananda didn't want to tell him that it was actually winter. Swamiji, we don't have picnics in winter. It was very cold. And so she said, Swamiji, the food is already, you know, in the house. And so he went back, and we all went back with him. But it's just a little example of how Swamiji was totally beyond body consciousness.
Well, there was an incident that came up, and I went to Swamiji to consult with him about this. At the time, I was working on a thing called field theory in physics, and I'd been working on this since college, and it had developed to the point where I saw the full implications of this field structure idea, and I was troubled by the fact that it had practical applications, and some of which, in the hands of the wrong people, could be dangerous, because it involved powers, theoretical powers that could be used as weapons. And so I was in a dilemma as to what to do. I could see the good things it could produce, but the bad things always came with it. And it all depended on who's making the application. So I went to Swamiji and I said, Swamiji, I explained a bit about the theory and what it could do and what it could become, and said that I'm really wondering if I should not make this public, just keep it quiet and let it be something, an understanding I have, but not try to make it public. Just because of the fact that in the wrong hands, bad things could happen. And Swamiji, I was all prepared for this long explanation of his point of view, and was pretty sure he'd say, "Oh my God, don't bring that forward. We don't need that in the world." To the contrary, he simply said, "In the presence of truth, only ignorance suffers." And I thought, wow, it meant that our duty is the truth, and we shouldn't be afraid to bring forth truth. And I thought, well, if this theory is wrong, then it's ignorance and I suffer. If it's right, then those that are going to use it for in bad ways, ignorantly, then they suffer. And then sometime later, I brought it up again to Swamiji, and he says, well, when you bring it forward, why don't you put at the beginning of this book that you're writing, why don't you put a statement saying, if you have bad intentions on the use of this idea, don't read any further, just put the book down. And I was thinking, oh my God, can you believe it? How could I say such a thing? It's, and then the conversation was left. So when I started writing the book in the final version, keeping what Swamiji had said in mind, I said, well, I'll write a little introduction that will try to say what Swamiji said about don't read it if you're going to do something evil with it. So I started the introduction, and usually introductions are, 3 or 4 pages or something. It ended up, this introduction is over 300 pages long. and my feeling as I was reading along was, anybody who would follow this idea as along this long, tortuous route is going to be putting that book down and is not going to hang around for the big idea, in quotes. And it sort of had a self-correcting mechanism built into it. And I really felt this is Swamiji's answer to my question of how do you separate those that wish to do good and those that wish to do bad. And again, it goes back to having Swamiji as a companion in your life so that the decisions you make are well informed and are occurring in the background of this divine consciousness that Swamiji is. That makes life doable in the sense of allowing you to bring forth what you know to be truth. So that's our little sharing today, and
we thank you all so much for doing this, and we remember you all, and and thinking of Swamiji, who is always with us. He's always with us, as Don was saying. And we're so grateful to have Swamiji in our lives. He has been, we were very young when we met him, and for the last, say, 53 years or so, we've been, had Swamiji with us, either physically or then after he left, in his
Spiritually.
divine spiritual presence. So thank you all very much for putting this event on, and thank you for letting us share.
Best wishes to you all.
Hari Om, Om Namo Bhagavate Shivanandaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Chidanandaya.
Bye all.
Bye.